Hello and welcome to our week of celebrating Indie Author Week UK in a series of videos that we call Wine and a Book. Indie Author Week UK is a week that highlights and showcases a variety of talent in the independent author community. We are talking each day about each of our books published to date. This year we focus on how each came to be published, and then we'll do a short reading from the book. Each story is different and we hope helpful to new authors and that they may chime with existing authors otherwise.
Welcome to our first wine and book of this year. Cheers. What twitches and ticks and rushes round the Isles of Scilly in autumn? Answer: a silly birder. The thing is that birds arrive on islands such as the Scillys from America, from Asia, and this is because they got there. They're either lost or they've been driven away from their course by storms. Islands are particularly excellent, and the best we know around here are the Scilly Isles and the islands north of Scotland. In 1984, a few members of the Christchurch Harbour Ornithological Group joined together to go to the Isles of Scilly to do some bird watching. Well, we don't call it bird watching, we don't call ourselves bird watchers either. It's twitching and we are birders. In 1984 we had a wonderful time. We saw lots and lots of really good birds, and what really struck me was this incredible subculture of the birders of the Isles of Scilly, and birders who are really just so utterly devoted to their bird watching that I thought I would write a book about it. And this book is entitled Scilly Birding and Joining the Madding Crowd. It is published by Brambleby Books, and here it is. I wrote the book, often in a pub in the evening, in 1984-5, and I offered it to a publisher and they didn't want it. So the manuscript sat in a drawer until 2013, when I offered it to a firm called Brambleby Books that was advised as a possible publisher by a birdwatcher, or a birder I should say. And I will read an extract from it. In birding, Leon began, relaxing back in his chair, and especially silly birding, the important thing is never let yourself get behind. The blue throat is today's bird, but the olivaceous warbler, rock thrush and dusky warbler were all yesterday's birds. Simon, whatever you do, you must never ever allow yourself to become a yesterday's man. If you do, you'll find yourself dithering around, wondering whether to go for yesterday's, today's, or even the day before yesterday's birds. If you could possibly avoid it, never go to bed with a yesterday's bird still to see. After relaxing over our coffee and chatting together casually, we decided we might as well go and see if we could get even better views of the rock thrush. It really didn't matter if we saw it or not, though, because we were all today's men. We had already seen it. We wandered off through higher moors, past Porthelic and a small crowd of birders who hadn't seen the blue throat. Now that I had it safely under my belt, it was hard to believe that there were still people who hadn't. We walked up to a cluster of rocks close to the airport known as Giant's Castle. Coming the other way and struggling against a stiffening breeze were Chris and Tessa. They had serious, slightly pained expressions on their face. In fact, they didn't look happy at all. They hadn't got to grips with the rock thrush yet, nor the blue throat. And both were ticks. That means new birds. At that moment, they were torn between the attractions of both. A typical example of yesterday's men, Leon scoffed. Chris and Tessa's fortunes were about to change dramatically. There's the rock thrush. I was astonished as I noticed this stunningly beautiful bird perched on a rock no more than 10 yards from us. In demeanour, it was a bit like a wheat ear. Once we had settled ourselves down with as little commotion as possible, I glanced over my shoulder and was pleased and relieved to see that Chris and Tessa had already spotted it and had a telescope strained on it. We could now study this delightful bird at leisure. It had a greyish-blue back with white edging onto its primaries. It had a lovely chestnut-red breast and a tail the colour of a redstart's, which is bobbed constantly. In fact, it did look very like an oversized redstart. It flitted happily from rock to rock, no doubt relieved to have lost at last temporarily. In fact, it did look very like an oversized redstart. It flitted happily from rock to rock, no doubt relieved to have lost, at least temporarily, the horde of birders who were pursuing it. As we watched it, it moved slowly towards Porthelic and to the headlands beyond. It wasn't many minutes before the first birder was silhouetted against a skyline above Giant's Castle. It wasn't that long before desperate birders were all around us, like foxhounds that have run a fox to earth. "Did you see it?" one of them demanded impatiently. What might I have seen?" Leon answered enigmatically, being deliberately obtuse. "The rock thrush, of course," spluttered the birder. He looked at the five of us as though we were all terminally thick. "Oh, that," Leon replied dismissively. "Haven't you lot managed to catch up with it yet?" "No, we bloody haven't." "Come on, did you see it or not?" "Until you lot arrived, it was sitting peacefully on that rock over there, not 10 yards away. We've just been having utterly stonking views." "Where's it gone now?" "Out beyond Porthelic and those headlands in the distance, I should think," he replied. "If only you were to sit down patiently, it might even come to you," Leon added sarcastically, knowing the chances of that happening were minimal. As we talked, more and more exhausted birders poured over the skyline. This mighty horde had been pursuing the rock thrush from Peninis Head to Giant's Castle and beyond since first light. Someone observed that they hadn't seen it eating anything. That was hardly surprising. The pursuing birds were scarcely giving it a chance. However, perhaps the bird was having a laugh at the birder's expense after all. As we had just observed, it only takes a few minutes for a bird to put a considerable distance between itself and its would-be admirers. With a bit of luck, the rock thrush would only consider the birding army as a very mild irritation. Having flown from southern Europe, it would be a minor problem for it to fly the short distance to the Cornish mainland, where it would probably be lost forever. Leon began to chuckle as he recognised the elite of the birding world huffing and puffing past us, only to dip yet again when they arrived at Giant's Rocks. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and it's the first of the books that we'll be looking at over the next few days, and of course, enjoying a glass of wine. Hope to see you again. Cheers.